Hello everyone, welcome back to the Hindu Explainer series. I'm Kushagra Goel. Hope you all had a very fruitful and festival Diwali. And now let's begin your CLAT preparation for 2021. The festive season is upon us, but your diligence and religiosity with current affairs is what is essential to get you through the exam. So moving on now, on November 16, we have two big news. First is on the economic front. The Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership has begun. We'll be discussing this in a little bit more detail. Then Nitish Kumar will again will be the CM of Bihar. It has been declared by the NDA meet. And then there is a sad news that Soumitra Chatterjee has passed away. He's a pioneer, a stalwart of cinema. And we'll be discussing a little bit about his awards and discussing his obituary written by the Hindu. Then on the regional news, there is again news about rise in pollution levels post Diwali, which has become an undercurrent for the past few years, almost a decade, and that there is a huge rise in the corona cases in Delhi specifically. Everywhere else, cases are on a downturn slope. The number of deaths by corona are also reducing. So that is good news and worrisome news at the same time. On the editorial front, it is more important for us in the sense that there is now a editorial criticism of the Supreme Court order of release of Arnab Goswami on interim bail. So I'll be discussing this, why there is criticism and what this article is all about on a more principle level, telling you about the format, the process through which usually you get bail and why there is criticism for this order. We had also previously discussed the plus points of this order. We'll be discussing the criticism today because the editorial is about that. On the left hand side, the two editorials are about foreign affairs. First is about Pakistan and the the LOC crisis that is now brewing because of ceasefire violations by Pakistan, and then the Myanmar elections. For the past two videos, I've been talking about the results of the Myanmar elections, so we'll be discussing that. On the bottom here is the editorial about the US politics again. This is important for us to know that, see, the Democratic Party in the US is also not a homogeneous group, that not everyone in the party thinks similarly. There are strands. Just like in 1950s and 60s, the Congress Party was considered an umbrella organization where there were right-wing, left-wing, centrist strands everywhere. So the Democratic Party in US is nowadays considered to be of that kind, that there are different strands. The two most prominent strands of the Democratic Party are the progressives led by Bernie Sanders, and then there are new leaders upcoming, Elizabeth Warren, AOC, and then there are the centralists, such as Joe Biden is considered a centralist. But this article states that, see, the Democrats have been able to swing hardcore Republican states only because there is a widespread interest for the progressive agenda of the Democratic Party. That the reason why Joe Biden has, despite Donald Trump increasing his vote share, his total vote count, Joe Biden has still been able to beat him on popular vote share by a huge margin. And that has only happened because the people of America have voted wholeheartedly for the progressive agenda. And that if the Democratic Party wavers on this, again there'll be a pushback. That, remember, Barack Obama was considered a centrist, and that there was a pushback to Donald Trump only because Obama had failed to deliver on the progressive agenda. And if Joe Biden fails to do this, then again there'll be a pushback. And the Democrats had till now united only because they considered Donald Trump as a scarecrow, that he had to be removed first and then we'll resolve everything else. But now that that is aside, the Democrats need to come together and move towards the progressive agenda. So we'll have to see the policies of the US, whether they're actually progressive in the sense of providing healthcare to all, the climate deal, and those kinds of agendas, abortion laws. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. Now, on the left hand side of the op-ed is a editorial about the trade unions. As you know, 4 new labor codes have been brought into picture by the Modi government, and they are a part of reforming the labor laws. Now, one important criticism this op-ed talks about is that how it disenfranchises the trade unions, that it reduces their power. Now, why is that relevant? Is because, see, the first and foremost step to improve anyone's legal standing or societal standing is to give them a legal backing or a legal authority or recognition of their right. That is exactly what the constitution is also about. There are specific laws which discuss the modalities of how those rights are, but the constitution is still the cradle. Now, this article states that, see, the new labor codes give employers more power to deregister a trade union. Trade unions are a place for the employees. They make they are their organization through which they push their agenda to the employers. Now, but these labor codes give more power to the employer in the sense of deregistering a trade union. And if trade unions are deregistered, then employers can always lure some of their favorable employees and then reduce the rights of everyone else. So that concern is what has been highlighted in this editorial. More details, technicalities are not so relevant as to on what grounds it can be done or what it cannot be. Nevertheless, it's just a concern. More specifications are what might come in your legal reasoning. So, but at this point of time, this editorial is only talking about the principle level. Now, on the right hand side, at the beginning of our series, I discussed how the Hindu replies to the letters to the editors, and this article is about this. We'll be discussing 2 principles that this talks about because they are generic and relate to our constitutional principles. On the bottom again is about the US politics and how the Democrats will not have a smooth sailing in the Senate because they have not won a majority in the Senate, which is the upper house of the US Congress, just like Rajya Sabha is in India. Now, on the more national news, there is updates about COVID, and then one important thing is this report. This report about sex ratio in our country in different states has come out. We'll be discussing this, what it is about at a later point. And then there is the obituary on Soumitra Chatterjee. Obituary is a appraisal, a recognition, walking through their journey. So whenever a big stalwart or someone passes away, the newspapers or journals give an obituary about anyone. And that is exactly what this is about, tracking the journey of Soumitra Chatterjee from beginning to the end and how he was still very active, just like Amitabh Bachchan today, and that there are a lot of other actors give up on active acting once they pass the age or when they win the Dada Saheb Phalke Award. But Soumitra Chatterjee contracted COVID while he had returned to a set post the lockdown, and it signifies how big or active role he was playing even at this age of his life. So we'll be discussing a little bit about Soumitra Chatterjee. Then there is a V.K. Krishna Iyer memorial lecture had taken place, and former Chief Election Commissioner S.Y. Qureshi talked about some reforms. Firstly, about blockage on criminalization of politics. If you remember, when we had discussed the Bihar results, I talked about how most of the MLAs from all parties elected have serious heinous crimes registered against them, or investigation is going on in those cases, and that is exactly one of the problems that Mr. S.Y. Qureshi has talked about. And he also talked about a ban on opinion polls or exit polls or opinion. He didn't elaborate much on what, but it was a passing remark, and he states that how it undermines the democratic process. So we'll have to keep that in mind if anything else comes up on that regard. Then on the sporting news, there is there is, on international level, a new crisis is now brewing in Sudan and Ethiopia. Ethiopians are fleeing their country to Sudan. 25,000 Ethiopians have allegedly fled Ethiopia. We'll be keeping an update on this as in more details come in, and then I'll be explaining this in more detail. Then uh, on the sporting front, Formula One, which is the pioneer motorsport racing game, Lewis Hamilton, a Briton driver, has won the 7th World Championship. And he has equaled the record of Michael Schumacher, who German motorsport driver. And both of them have now won 7 World Championships. They are the top, joint top riders who have won World Championships. He is the first black origin driver to do so. So that is also relevant. The reason why Lewis Hamilton becomes important is because he's a black origin driver, and that the sport is considered an elitist sport, and that he represents the real diversity, and that becomes important. So he won his first title in 2008, then won from 2004, between 2014 to 2020. He has won 6 titles, 4 on the trot, like consecutively. So that becomes relevant from the sporting perspective. Then nothing more on the sport level. Now let's dive into the more detailed news. So first of all is the mega trade bloc RCEP has taken off. Now what is RCEP? RCEP was announced in discussion since 2012, and that a new trading bloc needs to be built in South Asia, Asia in general, because see, Europe has their European Union, US, Canada, Mexico have NAFTA. So all that, keeping in mind that there is a need for more economic collaboration between the Asian countries, and that Asia represents the rise of the region. So on that regard, discussions had started taking place. But last year, Prime Minister Narendra Modi had announced when he was attending the summit that, see, East Asia Summit, that see, we will not be signing the RCEP, we will not be joining. The original discussions for RCEP had taken place between ASEAN, 10 ASEAN nations and 6 other nations. 6 of them, the names of them are in this article, which also becomes relevant. So the 10 ASEAN countries: Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, Laos, PDR, Vietnam, Myanmar and Cambodia. And then there are 6. China becomes the most important one because it's the largest economy within this trade bloc itself, but there are other big ones: Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and then there was India also in the original discussions. So that means that itself explains how big a deal RCEP could be if it had taken off an India. But the reason why India didn't join it also becomes relevant. See, India is a service exporting economy, not goods exporting economy, which China is. So on that regard, India's concerns with regards to RCEP had not been addressed. Our foreign minister, Mr. M. Jaishankar, had also recently announced in a summit that, see, there is now erosion of trust between member nations, and that we need to address that first before we join anything. So why erosion of trust becomes important is because, see, if everyone is following the same rules, then it becomes okay. That there will be a scope. If someone violates it, then we will have some redressal. But then if that is not the case with incidental signing towards China, then he says that our interest cannot be protected, because see, China as an economy is bigger than all these countries combined also. So we need to keep that in mind, that if one versus China, all these countries don't have a lot of heft, but if together they can apply the same rule, then China can be controlled. But if that wasn't the case, Prime Minister Narendra Modi was free to walk out. But RCEP has always stated that India is welcomed in it, and it will have to apply for membership, and India's concerns will be taken into account. So we'll have to keep an eye on that, whether India's interests are actually taken into account. Moving on now towards Soumitra Chatterjee. So his 2 of the most nationally known roles are, first of all, in Pather Panchali, the Appu trilogy of Satyajit Ray, where he played the character of Appu in three films from 1955 to 1959. And then he is also known for his character in Joy Baba Felunath as Feluda in 1978, two of his most popular films, and then some notable awards that he has won over his time. That Padma Bhushan in 2004, Dada Saheb Phalke Award in 2012, Legion of Honor by the French government in 2018. So his awards, what he has won, and his journey becomes relevant for us in this current affairs cycle. So don't skip that, because see, when a person passes away, what also becomes relevant is, let's say, Satyajit Ray or any of their bigger collaborations or something that they have done in their life. So in general, we need to keep an eye on the awards and his famous roles. Another thing that has been talked about a lot is the hospital in which he has passed away, which was the same hospital where Satyajit Ray had also passed away. So it was like a coming back of circles. Then we'll move on, because there is not much more to discuss here. Rather than, like, we can go on and talk about his different films. He has participated, acted in more than 300 plus films. So we can go on and on about that, but that doesn't change, adds much to the content. Now, we'll consider the Vital Statistics of India report, which are talked about by, which has told us about the sex ratio of different states in our country. Now, what about the report? The report is based on a civil registration system. So civil registration system is the system of self-disclosure, that states register the data, and that is compiled by the Registrar General of India. So the report is based on that. What are the who are the states that are missing from the report? UP, Bihar, West Bengal, Maharashtra, Sikkim and Jharkhand. So four big states, large chunk of India's population has not been accounted in the report. UP, Bihar, Maharashtra, Jharkhand, West Bengal are, the bigger states with the higher population ratio. Then a brief summary of who are the better ones. So the best performing state in India is Arunachal Pradesh, with a sex ratio of 1084. So that becomes, that is a really good news, that a state is performing where there are more daughters than sons, and that is a sign of a huge, on a more health notion also, that there is better medical facilities there is less social taboo with daughters. Sex ratio in general signifies a lot of different things. That's why the parameter becomes really relevant. On the big states, Kerala is the best performing one, with 963. On the worst performings, Manipur is the lowest, and then on the big states, Punjab and Gujarat are the worst performing one with 896 and 897. Both Punjab and Gujarat have a higher GDP. Their economic overall GDP growth, economic wealth is very high, but that also doesn't mean that socio-economic the wealth flows into socio-economic equality, and that is exactly what we can see, that if sex ratio is there are less daughters, how enfranchised they are within the state also becomes a point of question, and that is also brings into the debate of GDP plus vis-a-vis equality. And that debate we need to keep in mind. Delhi, as you know, has historically been a poorer region with regards to sex ratio, has still done relatively well with the sex ratio of 929. And Haryana also has 914. States considered traditionally to be on the poorer side. Jammu and Kashmir is also not very far behind vis-a-vis Kerala and the other better performing states of Karnataka with the sex ratio of 952. So, despite large-scale violence in Jammu and Kashmir, the equality of, there is no social taboo vis-a-vis girls. Now, we'll be coming to the main editorial at a later point. I'll consider the two other editorials first, because there is a little bit of detail to be explained there. Now, with regards to Myanmar, now, despite Myanmar now being a democracy for 5 years, there is concern with regards to Rohingya crisis that we had discussed when the result had come up first. And then there is also concern of how much of a democratic country is still Myanmar. So that is what this editorial is about. It tells us that, see, despite there being a elections taking place, there is an election commission there, the military still retains a lot control, like a huge amount of control, and that is on a constitutional plus institutional level. So in parliament, a number of seats are reserved for the soldiers. That makes any constitutional amendment impossible unless the military is on board. So even if Aung San Suu Kyi wants to reform the constitution, recognize the rights to the Rohingyas, she cannot do it without a constitutional amendment, and the military needs to be in agreement of that. And secondly, the defense ministry is also not under the purview of the democratic government. So that also becomes a problem for her. So we'll have to see how much she can actually retain the democratic fervor and respond and really embark on a democratic journey. South Asia, as you know, has been known for a region where militaries, most famously Pakistan, are considered democracy for namesake, that there is democracy but military is the real controller. On the other article, this one about Pakistan and India crisis, that why there is trouble on LOC is because Pakistan, the reasoning behind rise in ceasefire violations suddenly right now is one that now the snow will settle on the mountains and the passes will close. So infiltration of the terrorist, if it has to take place, this is the last push. So that is why the firing or ceasefire violations are a cover for terrorists to percolate through our borders or through tunnels that they keep on digging to infiltrate into our country. Then the other is that Pakistan is trying to build pressure on India from the other side, that it wants to spoil India's time in the UNSC. India will now become, from 2021 to 2022, a non-permanent member of the Security Council at UN. So it wants to waste a lot of time of India on terrorism talks. The FATF meet is taking place in February. Pakistan is on the grey list, on the verge of blacklist. So India, it wants to divert India's attention, and also play a spoilsport in Indo-China relationship by the fact that it is trying to stoke that India is trying to harm Pakistan China economic corridor, and through that raise concern within Chinese about how India is a threat to them, and that will stall progress on the talks or relative peace, as you can say, to come back. So that is it on updating you. Now we come back to the bigger question of criticism of the Supreme Court. Now, the order of interim bail to Arnab Goswami also talks about different other legal principles. So what are those principles? First is police and judicial custody. Then there is a criminal case versus preventive detention. The writ of habeas corpus writ jurisdictions. Then there is interim bail and bail. And then there is appeal. So the article in general first lays out how the court has not followed a general procedure that is done, and it tells us an incident between oath taking ceremony of Venkatachalaya in 1990s when PV Narasimha Rao was the Prime Minister, and that after this oath ceremony, Venkatachalaya was Prime Minister PV Narasimha Rao approached him and said that he looked forward to having a cordial relationship between the judiciary and the state. But Venkatachalaya stated that, Mr. Prime Minister, the relationship between us, the judiciary, has to be correct. That the relationship between the executive and the judiciary has to be a correct one. And not cordial. Cordiality between court and government has no place in our constitutional schemes of check and balances. That our role as judiciary is to keep a check on you and your power grab. And if we are failing in that duty, then we are failing in our constitutional duty. And that is exactly what Sriram Panchu noted, senior advocate, and famously he was on panel for the Ayodhya mediation that the Supreme Court had wanted to take place before the judgment. So what is this in general talks about? That why there is, apart from procedural level, there is more criticism of the court. It states that, see, there are other cases which are which seem far more important for the constitutional fabric. As you know, when the order had come out, I had explained how Justice Chandrachud stated that this will be a death of liberty if we do not grant freedom to this man. And the article questions of how there are other important decisions that are pending before the Supreme Court which have not been talked about, which have not been addressed by the Supreme Court, and can have far more deeper ramifications on liberty and constitutional nature of Indian Republic if not addressed on time. And it has stated, he is stating his alarm that how this case got listed on the same day within a matter of hours, but there are other cases pending for months and years which have not been discussed by the Supreme Court, such as electoral bonds, the challenge to Article 370 or CAA. So those cases, or release of other more notable journalists, and that have not been addressed. And then there is a caution for Attorney General of India and the Solicitor General. He states that, see, Attorney General is not the office of an extension of the executive. They are a constitutional positions and they have to respect the constitution. So he is drawing a distinction between constitutional post and a state appointed employee. So that is much about the article. Now what I am going to explain to you today is what is the procedure or process through which this, and why this is calling for criticism of the court. So I've tried to make a flow chart for this. So the case for Arnab Goswami is a simple one. Under Indian Penal Code 306, abetment to suicide. A person passed away, a suicide note was found in his room stating 83 lakhs of my money is due to Arnab Goswami. He has not been paying me and I have to pay, or people are killing me for that, and hence because I cannot pay it, I am now willing to escape. That is considered a reasonable ground. So on that level, the courts, the police sought his custody, police custody, but the lower court, so the matter goes to the lower court first, where the court, a trial court, where the trial actually begins, because it is a criminal case. So in that, he was sent for a 14-day judicial custody. On the same day, then he sought for interim bail. That, see, there is something unreasonable, that there is something problematic, and my interim bail is an immediate relief that is given to a person who has been granted custody. That there are grounds, on specific grounds on which why I should be granted freedom. And if trial court says no, you can go to the, for appeal to the High Court and Supreme Court. Then there is a normal bail procedure which can also be granted during the time of custody only, which is, again, you'll apply for bail at the trial court and then go to appeal to High Court and Supreme Court. Now, in criminal, then comes the writ jurisdiction under Article 32 and 26. They are for ensuring your legal plus constitutional rights. Now, preventive detention is called for an exception to normal procedure, that whenever you are arrested, you are told about your grounds of why you are being arrested or you are being detained, and preventive detention is an exception, that you are a threat to public and that is why we are detaining you. Now, what has happened here is that Arnab Goswami didn't move, his interim bail application was moved at the trial court, which was rejected. Now, rather than applying for appeal for under this part, he approached the High Court on the ground of writ petition of habeas corpus to produce the body before the court. Now, his arrest is already known. the place of where he is being kept, which is a judicial custody. So he's protected by the magistrate, unlike a police custody in prevention. So for example, a lot of journalists who are in jail by the UP government under UAPA or other journalists, they are not even told about their grounds or are not under protected custody of the magistrate. They are in police custody. No one actually knows where they are. But here, his position was already known where he was. But nevertheless, he approached the High Court on a normal case for writ jurisdiction, where his body has already been known. Then the High Court rejected that, stating that, see, you already have access to bail, interim bail, and then you have access to bail also, normal bail procedure. There is no reason for your case to be coming under writ jurisdiction. But the Supreme Court overturned it on the same day. High Court order came in the evening. Next morning itself, the case during vacation was listed by the Supreme Court. On the same day, he was granted relief. So now, why there is criticism of the Supreme Court? Because the Supreme Court has violated the hierarchy and respect for procedure that is granted to everyone. Also, on the next day of Supreme Court's hearing was Arnab Goswami's bail petition for before the trial court. So one more night and this person would have had, if his case was so strong, he would have been given bail by the trial court itself. But the court felt it was such a immediate need of the hour that this person needs to be out. Now, Supreme Court, if it felt that someone doesn't need to be in jail, they don't need to be in jail. That is exactly what Sriram Panchu is also talking about. But the concern is that for one person, there is so much outrage by the Supreme Court, but for the others, it is not. So I hope this explains to you that what were the other remedies that were available to him and why there is criticism for the Supreme Court of what action they actually took place under which relief was granted to Mr. Arnab Goswami. That becomes important because of the principle of judicial hierarchy and judicial process. So, another criticism here is that, see, for the rich and the powerful, the hierarchy, the court is there on immediate level, but for the others, they have to go through different procedures. And that if you're powerful, you can overpower entire procedure and get relief immediately. So that is also a concern. The principle is law is equal for everyone, and that has been violated, and that also becomes in question. The other principles of which I talked about, we'll be talking about them over time whenever they come. Interim bail, a criminal case and preventive detention, or the difference between police and judicial custody. There is a simple, in police custody, you're kept in a police station under the jurisdiction of the police, but in judicial custody, you're protected by the magistrate, your rights are protected, the court knows where you are, and there is a security of your life. Also, it's there in police custody, but it's considered more so in the judicial custody. So this procedural importance this procedure web becomes important as to why there is criticism of the Supreme Court. Hopefully the court will uphold the rights of everyone else in the same manner of other journalists as now they have done so for Mr. Arnab Goswami. So thank you so much. I hope this explains. If there are more doubts, feel free to put them in the comment section. I will go through this all over again if you want, because see, the point of this series is to help you all for your preparation, and we believe this part will be an important one coming through. We'll be discussing it over and over again as it will be a developing story. So thank you so much. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do hit that bell icon on the right hand side of the subscribe button so that you don't miss the update for tomorrow. And thank you once again. Wishing you all the very best.